Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is March 21st, 2024, and we are staring at charts yet again, taking a look at Bitcoin here on the daily to start. We can see that since we last spoke, at least in the recorded format, this will be streamed as a recording on X and YouTube here shortly, but this is a recording. Since we last had our staring at charts video, which was Tuesday of this week, we can see that Bitcoin came down and tagged our area of interest here at the monthly closing all-time high zone. That area is between 61,350 or so down to 58.8. We can see that Bitcoin got a beautiful bounce out of there right back into the all-time high swing zone. This was the first all-time high in 2021 here in April at $65,000. Bitcoin did regain that. And then subsequently in yesterday's candle came down and retested it as well. This zone is from 65K to 69K. We do need to see Bitcoin closing candles back above 69K. That would be this lower high and lower swing up here. If Bitcoin can recover above there, I would start looking to the upper first standard deviation as a viable target at around 70,600 or so to the all-time high area. That would be on a close. You could even take some of the close opens in between around $72,000 to $73,000, and then the wick high up there right around the upper second standard deviation at around 73.5 to 74K. If Bitcoin can start closing back above there, well, then I would be looking for around 75 to 78, and then above there around 80 to low 80 region, around $83,000. And we'll take a look at that here shortly again. Now we can see that the Bollinger Bands are in compression right now on the daily, as Bitcoin did get that expansion from the weekly zone down here at around $50,000 to 53 on the top side here, where Bitcoin was rejecting the September of 2021 weekly swing high, or wick high, if you will. Once breaking out from there, Bitcoin reclaimed this prior monthly resistance zone. That was the monthly closes, and then the all-time high zone to go on and make new all-time highs. And now it's just come back and retested the closing all-time highs on the monthly from in October of 2021 in this case. Could it still fall further and test that 58.8 down by the Bollinger Band's lower third standard deviation? Yes, it is a viable target still, as long as Bitcoin is trading and closing candles below the daily lower high swing and close structure right here at around 68,350 to $69,000. So that is still a viable target to the downside. Then again, if we do see Bitcoin closing candles above $69,000, that's where we're looking at the highs again and higher to make new all-time highs. Now, when in a compression phase like this for Bitcoin, you can still see pretty big volatility. I mean, we have quite a large range here between that, almost $74,000 in the wick high up here, all the way down to $60,000. So roughly a $14,000 to $15,000 range between this last, consolidation point on the daily and the highs, and then mean reversion right back to it. Now, in this case, Bitcoin did exactly what I would like to see when coming off of an expansion like we saw off the weekly here, and that's get expansion to the upside, come back and retest. Very strong bounces usually occur around support and resistance and the basis band of the Bollinger Bands to lower first, lower second, as long as they are above the prior swing lows and closing lows. Now, realistically, this was the last big swing low. Yes, swing chart's going to show you that Bitcoin's swing and closing chart's going to show you that Bitcoin's in a downtrend still. So we need that downtrend break at $69,000 to kind of flip bullish again, and at minimum be looking back to the highs and then for higher low structure. So this is an expected bounce. Bitcoin still is not out of the woods right now while trading and closing daily candles below 69K. Now, if we look at a few other things like BBWP, we can see that volatility within the bands remains fairly high. But as long as Bitcoin is closing in between the upper first and lower first now, we're going to see, Bitcoin kind of in a consolidation phase, at least in the lower term timeframes, until we see closures either below the lower second, which would be a breakdown below the $65,000 all-time high level from April of 2021. And if that was the case, I would be looking for Bitcoin to come back down and test somewhere around this current low, around the lower second standard deviation into the monthly here at around that 61, 350, maybe even dip down below it into this monthly all-time high closing zone to that 58.8 lower third. Now, if we did see closures below the lower second that then begin to lose that lower third area at the support at 58.8, that's where we'd be looking for compression to expansion with lower targets. Those lower targets, we'll talk about in just a moment, but roughly around 57.5 to 56K, and then even down to this prior weekly resistance to test it as support there at 53K down to 50K. That would be, a big move down still, even from here, but it would not be abnormal for Bitcoin to do this after swinging the prior all-time high and then making a slightly new higher all-time high. Now, if Bitcoin were to start closing back above the upper first and then pushing the all-time high and getting closes above the upper second standard deviation around 73,500, and then of course it has to meet the additional criteria of actually trading and closing a daily candle above the wick high of the all-time high, or the current all-time high in this case at 73,835, then we would be looking for compression to re-expansion to the upside to go hit some of those deeper targets, 75 to 78, and then 78 to 80, and then possibly low 80s. And we're going to look at that in just a moment after we get through a few more things here. And that is stochastic momentum. We can see that if Bitcoin can close back above $68,000, which it has tested in and around that area in the past couple of days since the bounce. So if it does retest that area in lower term time frame, start closing above there, start looking at 69K, possibly more. But it would need to close a daily candle above $68,000 now, and then we would get a K over D cross. We would need to see follow through in the subsequent closure. So wherever this pivot would update to, which when you see Bitcoin closing above or below pivots, typically what will happen is that pivot number will rotate to, like when it closed below the pivot number at the highs, the pivot was at the highs. So I would expect the pivot to then be somewhere around the lows, whether it's close lows at around $62,000 to $63,000, or the actual wick low down here into that monthly support, which came in at 60,771. So that is something to look out for in today, which would be the Friday candle. Now, of course, I'm recording this and we'll be streaming it on X and YouTube a little bit later here, which is still Thursday in the United States. But, it is something to look for here in this Friday candle. If it does start closing back above 68, we would be looking for a K over D cross. And then on Saturday's candle, we would want to see follow through to get a complete and fully confirmed cross back to the upside. And then, of course, we want to see Bitcoin regaining the basis and the upper standard deviations first, second, and then pushing that upper third to get expansion to the upside. Now, of course, if it does begin to fall apart, be aware that even if it does initiate expansion to the downside below the lower second here, yes, we would see volatility increase. Yes, we would see Bollinger Band expansion to the downside, but there's still a major support just below price action. So I would be looking for this monthly closing all-time high zone between 61,350 and that 58.8. And only if the condition is met where we did see at minimum, a 4 or 6 hour, possibly a 12-hour candle starting to trade and or close below 58.8, then I'd be looking somewhere around $56,000 to $58,000. And we're going to look at that on the weekly here. So if we look at the weekly, we can see that the Bollinger Bands are in a different position because we have a different structure on the weekly. But we can see the nice swing high. Could this become a swing low? Absolutely. How does it confirm a closing low? Close back above the opens here, take out the wick high. Even if it were to close back above, $69,000, would look very good, and then take out the wick high. We're looking for the weekly to march on to the upside. But if Bitcoin on the daily does start closing back in that monthly all-time high zone and losing 58.8, that's where we do have just below there the upper first standard deviation on the weekly at $58,000. And then if we take a look at the monthly, just below there, there's volatility band support right around the upper second standard deviation, and that is at $57,000. So kind of split the difference there. Bitcoin has been pulling back since the 2022 into 2023 lows at $15,500 at about 20 to 22%. That would put Bitcoin somewhere around. That's not what I want. That would put Bitcoin somewhere around the $57,500 or so, or somewhere around the upper second standard deviation. In this case, basically right around 57 and a half. And if Bitcoin were to start closing down there, to be quite honest, unless it were to come right back up and regain this monthly all-time high zone, on a daily and then subsequently a weekly time frame, the possibilities for price to drop further to retest the breakout prior to the new all-time highs down here at 53 to 50K would be on the table. The way to avoid that, if Bitcoin were to fall and hit, the upper second of the weekly, start getting a slight expansion down below, or I'm sorry, the upper second of the monthly. That's the upper second of the monthly, and then this would be the upper first on the weekly, somewhere around that $57,000 to $58,000. Well, that's where, in order to avoid falling further, Bitcoin would need to recover the monthly here, and preferably bulls would want to see a recovery back above the 61,350. Quick dip, don't close down there. If it did start closing down there on the daily and any higher term time frames than the daily, then we start opening up the targets down here to 53 to 50. But for right now, not worried about that. Bitcoin's got support below it. Only unless it starts to fail do we start looking further down. So far, this correction from swing to swing now has been 17.69%. So there we go. We got a meme number. Gotta love it. And you can go through the chart. You can look. 20 to 22% would not be abnormal, but we do have bigger players in the market now. So, and they're becoming more and more established day over day. And that is the spot ETF players. So it could be that we see less volatile pullbacks, at least right now, and maybe more volatile pullbacks later. I did get a question during the live stream yesterday, which was just a live stream, not a recorded video being streamed. Let me adjust here for a moment. And that was, is it over? Do I think that that Bitcoin is topped out? We're going to triple top Bitcoin here, and then it's all over, bear market yet again. Economies are crazy and terrible, but yet the markets are pumping. Inflation remains high, and they're fluffing the numbers, and they're printing money, fiat money all over the world to prop everything up, and it's all got to fall apart, right? So Bitcoin's obviously got a triple top. No. Here on the monthly time frame, you can see that Bitcoin is expanding. So, anytime that we have seen Bitcoin get expansion on the monthly time frame, and especially above the upper third standard deviation, typically it continues with that expansion above the upper third for 3 to 5 candles roughly. It could it be more? Could it be less? Last cycle we saw a double top, and we had never seen that before. In Bitcoin, we have an all-time high before the halving. That has never happened in Bitcoin's history before. So, am I looking for this to be over? Nope. I think this is barely getting started. I think that Bitcoin is due for some very large upside here very soon. Could it hang around in this zone and consolidate some more, maybe right into the halving? Absolutely. It possibly, we could possibly be seeing that occur, or that picture being painted, this week into next week. Who knows? We just have to define the criteria so that we can trade it effectively. In this case, I will be looking for further upside. You can see that the monthly pivot is at 67,500. So could it turn down and be pressured down on the monthly? Sure. But we're in an expansive posture from the monthly perspective, which means that we're looking at Bitcoin playing on the highs and higher while Bitcoin is in a volatility expansion phase. It can come all the way back to the upper first and still be incredibly bullish. That's now at $44,000. It can come back and tap on the upper second. It can fall in between the upper second and upper first and still be extremely bullish. And this is something that many don't want to hear that are very bullish, but it could even come back down and retest these highs on the monthly in and around $30,000 to $32,000 by the monthly basis band and still be bullish. Is that the first thing that I'm looking for? Absolutely not. No. In fact, when pulling this out to look at a 2-month, we can see that Bitcoin is just now getting into a position where we could see expansion on the 2-month time frame. It's trading and closing. Well, it's trading above, and it closed last 2-month candle above the upper first standard deviation here at $53,000. Hey, go figure. That is the prior breakout area. It's gone on to test the upper second standard deviation. And even if it closes below it, which would be at the end of the April candle, I would still be looking at this as, it's confirmed expansion of BBWP, so price volatility as it relates to the bands. If it starts closing above the upper second here at $67,860, almost $68,000, which is a local area on the daily, that's the pivot at 68. Well, we would be looking for, more aggressive expansion on the 2 months. So this is just getting rolling. I mean, this is 55 over 42. On the 2-month time frame, we had a normalization of the volatility reads for the first time in Bitcoin's history because it is, fairly young still. We had, high volatility to start when Bitcoin first listed, as it was pretty much parabolic. The cool down phase, which was mean reversion, nice highs here in 2017 and 2018. Cool down phase again, our highs in 2021. Which in the context of a cool down still made higher highs at $69,000 there after 65. But for the first time ever, we've seen an actual cool down phase double bottom, which means that we're getting normalization of volatility levels, which makes them far more accurate going forward. And it is confirmed volatility expansion on the 2-month, which is going to lead to higher prices. The pivot's down at 31,365. So do I want to see Bitcoin dropping any of the local range to, not really, but it's not going to invalidate anything. As long as Bitcoin's above this last high to higher low area, which is very, very far away at this point, it's bullish. So, and it's going to remain bullish. It can even dip real hard down to 38,152, and that's right around a monthly level, which was the 38.5 monthly close open area. So very, very nice. It's just kind of getting started. When looking at the 3-month, it's the same thing. This hasn't even begun volatility expansion of BBWP. So this is down here at 24 over 27, which tells us that this was mean reversion back to the highs. And as soon as this flips to green, meaning that BBWP would be over the moving average, so a 24 over 27 now, so at minimum it would have to be flipped or inverted. When looking at BBWP, we would have to see it get up over the moving average here. And then we're in expansion on the quarterly, which is a long-term time frame. We can see the pivots down there at 27,350. So this looks really good. Something else to note is that the 6-month will get its first ever volatility expansion at some point this year. We've got 3 months and 9 days, and Bitcoin has never, on this particular indicator, experienced a cross on BBWP. Now, how relevant is this? Well, it's a 6-month. It's still very young in terms of measuring BBWP volatility, but excuse me, sorry. This would be expansion or confirmed expansion of price volatility as it relates to the bands. Bitcoin's up above the upper second standard deviation, which is expansion to begin with, so it looks fine. So no, I'm not looking for this to end anytime soon. Pullbacks can be large and scary. Man, starting the coughing again. Starting the coughing again. My apologies. But pullbacks can be scary and large in terms of their percentages, but just zoom out. This thing has been just rip into the upside. So corrections are needed and normal. So that's going to pretty much do it for the bulk of the higher term time frame analysis. Let's take a look at the 12-hour because the 12-hour is doing something very interesting. There's a few different scenarios, if I can stop coughing and explain, that can occur with the 12-hour. We can see that we do have pressure up from Stoke here on closes above 61,241. So that number fairly far away from price as it stands right now, but price is very volatile. We can also see that it's in a cool down phase on BBWP as it relates to the bands because we got, expansion up and then it walked the bands up on higher volatility, mean reverted, bounced off the lower second, failed to get to the basis, and then started to get expansion to the downside. Now it's gone up to test the basis again. It has put in a swing high. It has not put in a closing high just yet. It could do that on this next candle if it closes anywhere below the open here. That would confirm the high at 65.5. But really only if it takes out the lower second standard deviation here at 64,700 on a 12-hour close would we be looking back for a retest of that lower second standard deviation, which is right around the lows, right around that monthly zone. And that's where we would be looking at somewhere around that lower second standard deviation, again, somewhere around 61,500. So lower second standard deviation on the daily and the 2-day are roughly in the same area. To be fair, the daily is at 61.8, the 12-hour is at 61.5. So we would want to see Bitcoin holding that level. It's also one of my favorite setups in all of markets in general when looking at Bollinger Bands and evaluating volatility, and that is expansion to a trend continuation, retest of the lower second standard deviation. So tap on it, expansion through it, failure, come back down and retest bullishly in this case. It can even swing down below it, but I'd be looking for closers around that lower second standard deviation at 61.5. And if they hold, that is the play. That, for me, not financial advice, that is the long play. And I had already mentioned last video that I'm in a swing position. I also took a nice scalp. And in this case, I would take the opportunity to refill that scalp as I have left a quarter of that position open in case Bitcoin runs and or comes back, and I can always turn that one into a swing, and then I'll probably be sizing up the other swing position. Not financial advice. Do your own research. Check your own charts. All right. Now, if Bitcoin does hold the lower first, that would be pretty bullish. Now, when I say hold the lower first, that means that we get some sort of a low structure around the lower first. So, if it starts closing below 64,570 or so, or 64.5, then I would generally be looking for it to retest a little bit lower. But how would it set a low here? Well, if it does come up and start closing above the open of the prior 12-hour candle, which is at $67,000, and then it can take out this 68,200 or so, 67,800 to 68.2 up here, then we would see a structural change. Of course, that would be back above the lower high here, and that would also set a swing and closing low. Getting back above the basis in general would be a good thing, and that's around that $68,000. And as I said earlier, that's where I would look for a test at minimum to $69,000 where this swing high came in. Above there, I would look to the upper first, somewhere around $70,000 to $71,000. And then above there, back to the all-time high area and higher to the upper second standard deviation, around 74 to 75. Above there, we would look for expansion of the Bollinger Bands. Maybe not initially, but I'd be looking somewhere around $75,000 to $76,000. If it gets above 75, it's kind of a range between 75 to 77, 78 up here by the upper third, which is coming in at around 77,500 currently. I would keep an eye on the 4 and 6 hours. It relates to this in the 12-hour time frame. So the closes, let's go back to the 12-hour real quick. For Bitcoin to maintain upside momentum close over close, which is what stochastic is reading. Again, this is not a stochastic RSI. This is a regular Stoch, which measures close over close price momentum. And it's going to remain bullish above 61,244. This will update in between now and when I stream tomorrow for the live stream session where we look at everything, including traditional markets and maybe even some alts. But I would be looking for that to remain somewhere around the lows. So even if it comes back to the lows and bullish retests and doesn't fail, then we'd be looking for a nice strong bounce in my opinion and my analysis. Now you do want to see how these things kind of fit in with the 4 and 6 hour. The 6 hour momentum pivot is at 66,134, so that is in the local range. Bitcoin trading below it right now, which means that if it does close below here in the next 5 hours and 11 minutes, this will get an initial cross down. Not a valid signal until we see the follow-up closure that turns both the K and the D read. But it's kind of oscillating around the basis band right now. It did reject in lower high fashion around the upper first. So it is biased to at least come down and test some more. Could it be over? Is this the test? We don't know just yet. You'll have to go to lower term timeframes to evaluate that. But as long as it's trading and closing candles above the lower first, it's fairly bullish to at least come back up and test where it is now. And that's coming in at 63,783. And if Bitcoin can regain the basis band here, which it's currently testing around $66,000, I did just test that in this 6 hour candle, then I would look roughly back to this local high around the upper first at $68,000. And then, of course, if it can get above there, we're looking for a test over here to 69, and then to the upper second above there around 70,000 to 70,250 or so. If it does get expansion above there, we're looking at the highs, and we're looking for that to roll into the 12-hour and daily structure as well. 4 hour, same thing. 4 hours probably turned down already. Yeah, $67,000. It's testing the basis, got a short-term bounce off of it at the moment. If it does fall below here, we're looking for at minimum, I'd be looking somewhere around this high at $64,000 to $65,000 again, right where this wick kind of came in, around $65,000, wick below it again. If it does lose the basis there at $65,000, so upper 64 region to 64.5 here at this high. Below there, look into the lower first, somewhere around 63,256. If that area was dropped, I'd be looking for a retest of the lows as we spoke about earlier, around 61,500 or so. If it can maintain the basis and recover the upper first standard deviation around 66,800, I'd look for a test around 67K to 68K. Above there, guess what? 69K again around the highs and the upper second standard deviation. If it can push above there, I would be looking for it to run the 70 region again to 70,500 or so from the 4 hour perspective, get a band replacement with upper second, upper third right now. That's pretty much all I've got for you today. Keep a close eye on price. Bitcoin is not out of the woods. You want to keep it really simple, above 69K, looking for the highs to at least get tested, possibly higher, to new all-time highs at 75 to 78, 78 to 80, and then low $80,000 region, somewhere around $83,000. That does come from the quarterly, I believe. Quarterly's at $80,000. Wicks above it would come in around 83, which is a fib. We'll pull that fib tomorrow and take a look at it again. But yes, there is a valid fib. I guess we can do it now. Let's just do it now. So from even just swing to swing bearishly, we can probably get some confluences here. 77 to 80 is 1272 to 1414. Above there, 1618 is falling in at $81,000 with the 1786 coming in at 85. I do think that those deeper targets in the deeper 80s, if it does break back out to the upside, very, very viable, but we need to see it. We'll probably see it initially before we talk again. If it were to do that in between us speaking, would be somewhere around the upper 70s to low 80s. If we were to take this full structure from the consolidation to the all-time high, you can see 1272 is coming in at 81, 800, almost $82,000. So there's your low $80,000 read. Yes, you can pull swing to swing too if you wanted. We can just get crazy with it and just find all the confluences. 78 to 80, 1618 coming in at 84,500. So again, roughly all the same areas that we've been talking about for quite some time. But I'm going to leave it at that for today. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are, in the world. Jeez, English is my first language too. No matter where you are in the world, please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. And with all of that being said, Landy out. Man, I thought this was going to be a shorter video, and it ended up not being a shorter video. Sorry.